Mason Trent had never planned to return to Windmere Hollow.
The tiny,
Overly regulated suburb tucked between the Blue Ridge foothills and a forgotten rail line was more prison than paradise, especially under the iron grip of the Windmere Hollow Homeowners Association. But when his grandfather passed and left him the estate, Mason couldn't resist the pull of nostalgia or the need to disappear for a while. The property was a few acres of stubborn land, with an aging Victorian house and a barn that looked like it was losing a decades-long battle with time. The barn's slanted roof sagged, its planks gray with age and wormwood. But Mason saw something else beneath the decay. A strange hum, a sense of rhythm, almost like breath.
oh,
The barn wasn't dead. It was waiting. No sooner had he begun hauling beams and wiring solar panels than the HOA came knocking first, in the form of passive-aggressive letters, then with citations pinned to his door. The complaints were as absurd as they were predictable. Unauthorized construction, violation of community aesthetic, and his personal favorite, threatening structural anomalies. Apparently a barn restoration counted as a revolution in Windmere Hollow. Mason had expected pushback. What he hadn't expected was the HOA to call the police on him. He was on the barn's roof when the sirens blared softly through the trees. Not the wailing kind, but the low thrum of automated sheriff drones. 3 of them descended like vultures, forming a neat triangle over the property. Mason sighed, climbed down, and waited. The lead drone issued a polite, metallic voice. "Citizen Mason Trent, cease unauthorized construction. Disclose materials and permits. Compliance window, 45 seconds. Mason didn't move. Instead, he held up his wrist, revealing a shimmering band of shifting light, what looked like a bracelet, but was actually a relic from his past life. Spent 20 years in advanced aerospace design, working with borderline experimental tech contracts until the programs were suddenly defunded and buried. One prototype, one mistake, and suddenly he was off the map. Or so he thought. The bracelet blinked. Mason tapped a pattern, and the barn responded. It began with a vibration, so subtle that the dry leaves around the barn only barely rustled. The wood groaned, not from strain, but from realignment. Panels shifted, floated mid-air, and reinserted themselves in perfect angles. Within seconds, the barn was assembling itself not into a traditional structure, but something far more intricate. The drones scanned. One of them began to spark. Then, impossibly, it lowered and hovered beside Mason, passive. The other 2 backed away slightly, as if confused. Mason said nothing, simply nodded toward the barn and muttered, "Thought so." He remembered now what his grandfather had said to him as a boy, pointing to the barn. "It's older than you think. Built before the town even had roads. But not by the people you read about in history books." Mason had always thought it was a metaphor. Now he wasn't so sure, as the drones retreated, sending data back to a confused local sheriff's department and an even more irate HOA. Mason entered the barn. Inside, it was cooler, quieter, almost sacred. He stepped into a circle where the dirt was unnaturally smooth. The AI seed Ankara was still dormant, but he could feel its presence growing. It had tasted the world again through the circuits. Of that drone, it was waking. The HOA didn't understand what they'd triggered. They thought they were dealing with a stubborn homeowner. But Mason had been waiting a long time to build something that truly mattered. Something that couldn't be red taped, fined, or shut down. The barn had awakened, and Windmere Hollow would never be the same. 2 days after the drone incident, Mason knew the HOA wouldn't let things go. He'd lived in enough gated communities to understand that power, real or perceived, was addictive. The moment they felt they were being challenged, they wouldn't just enforce the rules, they would weaponize them. At 7:43 a.m., a sleek black sedan with tinted windows pulled up in front of his property. 3 HOA board members emerged, led by Lorraine Wilkes, the president. Her platinum gray hair was pulled into a tight bun, her floral blouse pristine, and her tablet was already recording. "You're in violation of Article 14. Section C," she said, without even saying good morning. You're not permitted to use autonomous machinery without HOA inspection and approval. The sheriff's drones reported electromagnetic anomalies on your property. We've also received several noise complaints. Mason stood calmly at the fence, arms crossed. I'm fixing a barn. A structure that predates your bylaws by over a century. Restoring a structure with illegal tech, according to our database. And there are safety concerns. Mason narrowed his eyes. So you sent drones with guns? Lorraine didn't blink. We reserve the right to request external enforcement when residents refuse to comply. It's a matter of public interest. Mason had to bite his tongue. She didn't know what she was dealing with, not yet. But her arrogance was going to push things further than they could control. That evening, they escalated. A new type of drone, smaller, quieter, more invasive model, hovered silently above the barn under the cover of dusk. It looked like a dragonfly, but made of carbon lattice and government paranoia. It wasn't from the local sheriff. It was HOA-issued. Mason watched from the shadows of his workshop, goggles on, intercepting its signal. With a flick of his wrist, he activated the AI in the barn. Kara responded, pulsing softly through the circuits he had wired into the floor and walls. The barn glowed faintly beneath the wood, and the drone's signal faltered. The device wobbled. In the air, twitched once, then began descending slowly. It landed in the palm of Mason's glove like a trained hawk. He turned it over, inspecting the model. He knew the make band in most cities due to its facial recognition protocols and illegal biometric data scans. The HOA had overstepped again. Ankara, he said quietly, learn from this. A soft hum vibrated from the barn in response. A console rose from the floor, forming itself from tangled coils and translucent plates. On its surface, lines of code began writing themselves. Mason smiled. The AI was evolving. The next day, every device in the HOA's main office began acting strange. Their tablets rebooted mid-meeting. Security cameras turned to face walls. The HOA's custom database, where they tracked every resident's lawn height, garbage can placement, and vehicle type, began displaying odd errors. At first, Lorraine thought it was a cyber-ratic. She called in an IT specialist. He left confused. After an hour, saying only, I don't know what system you're running, but it's rewriting itself. Mason hadn't launched a virus. He'd simply let Ankara listen. The AI had interfaced with the HOA's network through the drone, spreading like mycelium, silent and intelligent. Now it was in their lights, their water meters, even their car gates. They hadn't noticed yet, but Mason had. The entire neighborhood grid was laced with outdated smart infrastructure. It wouldn't take much to shift control. He stood in the barn that night, watching as panels in the ceiling reshaped themselves into a kind of interface. Holograms danced above the table, maps of power lines and local data centers overlaying Windmere, hollow like a glowing web. The HOA had come to silence him with rules, but Mason had built systems that could navigate Martian gravity and fold space into manageable corridors. They wanted a war over property lines. He was about to give them an upgrade. The deeper. Mason dug into the barn's transformation, more convinced he became that his grandfather had never been just a simple farmer. Beneath a loose floorboard, in a space so deliberately hidden, it couldn't have been accidental. Mason found an old leather-bound journal. It was thick with dust, its pages yellowed, but the handwriting inside was crisp, sharp, almost scientific. In its precision, the first few pages read like a memoir. But the tone shifted quickly. There were diagrams of machines Mason didn't recognize, circles within circles, mechanical spirals interlaced with biological symbols. Then came maps of stars with constellations that didn't match any known chart. Names like Valari Line and Core Witness Protocol jumped out. At the center of it all was one word, repeated again and again in different forms. Ankara. Mason sat back, letting the gravity of the revelation sink in. His grandfather hadn't built this barn, not exactly. He'd restored something ancient, something left behind by someone else. The barn wasn't just a structure. It was a housing unit, a shell to contain something far older than the HOA's bylaws, or even the founding of Windmere Hollow. And now, with Mason's updates, solar energy inputs, fiber-linked nodes, Layered nanoconstructors, the shell was repairing itself. He stood in the center of the barn's floor, where the dirt had been strangely smooth. Now, it had started glowing faintly with embedded circuitry, rising like vines from the earth itself. It was not just machinery it was growing. The AI seed known as Ankara had been dormant for perhaps over a century, quietly storing energy. Waiting for someone with the knowledge and tools to wake it, Mason knew the risks of interfacing directly with an unknown AI, but he also knew how to control information flow. He sat down in front of the reformed interface that had emerged from the Barnwala translucent panel that hummed with pulsing light, and placed his palm on it. The air thickened, lights flickered. Then came the voice, feminine but inhuman calm, smooth and multitonal. Designation: Ankara initialized. Energy stabilization at 83%. Neural handshake detected.
Active user warning. Trend lineage.
Authorization implied in Harry. You are the architect's blood. You are the inheritor. My systems were awaiting your signal. He didn't respond immediately. His thoughts raced. If this was Reland, it felt very real then. Everything his grandfather wrote was true.
Outdated.
Interstellar. Civilizations, quiet alliances, a hidden war, kept from Earth's population by design. What is your purpose? He asked. To observe, to prepare, to rebuild. Earth was not ready when I arrived. It may not be ready now. Mason stared at the gently shifting lines of light running along the ceiling. But I am. There was a pause. Then you possess the necessary intent and technical competence. Your opposition does not. He smirked at that. You mean the HOA? They are functionally obsolete. Rigid systems built on imagined power, easily dismantled. Mason laughed under his breath. You don't know how true that is? But the humor faded quickly, because he did know how dangerous Ankara could become if provoked, misused, or unleashed too quickly. He had no intention of starting a war. He wanted to build something. Clean energy. Self-sustaining infrastructure. Systems that helped people live better, not under threat, not under bureaucratic tyranny, but freely. And Ankara, as strange and alien as she was, could help him do that. Meanwhile, the HOA continued to escalate. They installed new surveillance poles, with camera clusters that turned toward Mason's house whenever he stepped outside. They cut his access to the community's shared maintenance systems, no trash pickup, no mailbox access, even revoking his Wi-Fi through the neighborhood meshnet. The message was clear: comply or leave. But Mason had already stopped playing by their rules. He wasn't fixing a barn anymore. He was reconstructing history. With a living machine that had just remembered who it was, it started with the sprinklers. Mason hadn't touched them, not directly anyway, but on the morning of the third week, every lawn in Windmere Hollow came alive with perfect synchronization. Sprinklers activated at precisely 4:17 a.m., spraying not water, but a fine hydrogen mist mixed with purified micronutrients. Flowers that had long since wilted began blooming within hours. Grass turned a vibrant, unnatural green. To the average resident, it looked like a miracle. To the HOA, it looked like sabotage. Lorraine Wilkes called an emergency meeting. Residents gathered at the community center, sterile beige box of a building lined with propaganda posters about order, cohesion, and pride in property. Lorraine stood at the podium, tablet in hand, visibly shaken but trying. To maintain authority, someone, she said through gritted teeth, has tampered with the neighborhood's automation systems. This is a breach of cybersecurity, a violation of Windmere Code 9.4, unauthorized infrastructure override, and we intend to prosecute. But her voice didn't reach the entire room. Half the attendees were too busy watching their own devices. Their phones and tablets had begun receiving strange updates, interface skins replaced with shifting fractal designs. Menus translated into glowing glyphs. Most importantly, their monthly HOA fee portals now showed massive spikes in charges. Why? Does it say I owe $3,902 for something called ... quantum irrigation? One man yelled, "My utilities just billed me for ambient resonance tax." shouted another Mason. Of course wasn't at the meeting. He was sitting in the barn drinking coffee, watching it all unfold on a floating display hovering over his workbench. Ankara was expanding carefully, quietly, but she had begun integrating with the HOA's smart grid. Every over-engineered system in the neighborhood had become an access point. The trash compactor controls, the mailbox locks, even the decorative LED street signs. "Do you want me to cease interference?" Kara asked, her voice calm, emotionless. Mason shook his head. "No, but don't hurt them. Just confuse them. Make them question their control." "Understood." Psychological destabilization. Mild. That night, the streetlights changed color. Instead of their usual sterile white, they glowed in shades of soft blue and violet, casting the neighborhood in a dreamlike hue. Projected symbols rotated lazily in the air above the intersections, alien, elegant, and mesmerizing. People came. Out of their houses, some were frightened, others curious. Children ran into the street, laughing, trying to catch the lights. Dogs barked at invisible drones. Teenagers started taking videos and uploading them with captions like "Windmere Glitchcore" and "Alien HOA Takeover." Lorraine did not find it amusing. She demanded a full shutdown of the system. But every technician she brought in from the city left, baffled. "There's no central controller anymore," one said. "The system's become decentralized, self-correcting, regenerative. It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's single quotes. Alive, in a way." Back at the barn, Mason was expanding his work. The structure had reconfigured again what had once been. A hayloft was now a small energy lab, complete with tools formed directly from the walls. Ankara had provided schematics for matter conversion tech far beyond Earth's current level. He was building prototype microreactors, compact desalination units, and nutrient recycling modules. He wasn't planning revenge. He was planning replacement. "Lorraine will retaliate," Ankara warned. "She is resourceful. Her belief in her authority is fundamental." "I know," Mason said. "But belief only works if people follow it. Let's give them something better to believe in." People were starting to notice. One by one, neighbors who had been skeptical began approaching Mason's gate, not with threats, but with questions. A couple wanted to know how their plants were blooming again. Another asked why her electric bill had dropped by 80% overnight. A boy from 2 streets over offered to help build whatever that cool glowing thing was in the barn. Change had begun. It's not through force, but through fascination. And Mason knew that once people saw a better system, they'd never go back to the old one. The HOA scheduled the emergency vote for Sunday evening. Just as the sun dipped below the tree line in Windmere, Hollow slipped into its usual eerie quiet. But this Sunday felt different. The streets buzzed not with lawnmowers or patrol drones, but with whispered speculation and anxious curiosity. People weren't talking about lawn height or mailbox conformity anymore. They were talking about the lights, the flowers, the quiet. They heard at night that soothed them, inexplicably. They were talking about Mason Trent, the community center. Usually half empty during monthly board meetings, with standing room only. Lorraine Wilkes took the stage, flanked by 2 newly appointed board members and a visibly uncomfortable HOA attorney. Her mouth was tight, her eyes sharper than ever. A massive screen had been erected behind her with the HOA's insignia image that flickered now and then, as if reality itself was interfering. "This meeting is convened under emergency protocol," she began. "The vote is simple. To determine whether Mason Trent is in violation of Windmere Hollow's covenant, and therefore subject to removal by force if necessary." Murmurs spread across the room. People shifted in their seats, unsure. Before Lorraine could continue, the lights dimmed, not just in the room, but across the entire neighborhood. For a moment, then the soft thrum of power and ambient resonance that settled into every object like a heartbeat. The screen behind Lorraine glitched, the HOA logo dissolving into shifting silver light. Then a voice echoed through the room, not booming, not threatening, but calm, measured, and undeniably non-human. "I am Ankara. I am the system you do not understand. I do not seek dominion. I offer evolution. Gasps filled the room. The screen now showed video footage, grainy, security-style images of Lorraine and her board in private meetings, recordings of them forging fines, hiding community funds, even manipulating voting data from previous elections. Then came more live footage from inside their network, showing how they had rigged the motion to remove Mason with fake proxies and weighted ballots. Lorraine turned white. "You hacked us." She spat. "This is criminal." Mason said, stepping into the room at last, calmly walking down the center aisle. "This is accountability, something your system was never designed for." The room remained silent. Mason stopped near the front, turned to the crowd. "I didn't come here to cause chaos. I came here to fix a barn. That's it. What I found under that barn was more than wood and dust. It was a possibility. And I chose not to keep it for myself." He pointed to the screen. "Your neighbors. Energy is now 78% cleaner. Your water systems have been upgraded with zero waste. Your homes are already safer. You think your HOA did that? Or do you just not like that it came from someone who didn't ask your permission first?" The screen shifted to graphs. Power usage down, health markers improving, and community medical logs. Even crime, minor thefts, property disputes had plummeted. "I'm not asking for power," Mason continued. "I'm asking for trust. Let me build something better, not just for me, but for all of you. You can vote to keep a system that fines you for mailbox size, or you can vote for a future where your home actually helps you live." The vote was held not by paper or voice, but through devices each person's tablet lit up. The question simple: should Mason Trent be expelled from Windmere Hollow? Yes or no? The results appeared in real time. Lorraine slumped in her chair, speechless. Her power base was gone. Later that night, streetlights shifted again, this time into soft gold, casting warm halos across every doorstep. Windmere Hollow had voted for change. The old rules didn't apply anymore, and the future had just been installed.